big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
Day 2 of the 2025 NFL draft continues. The Bears have had quite the eventful draft so far. For this edition, we're actually live here at Halas, or I should say I'm live at Halas. Welcome to the Halas Beat, brought to you by the Bear Report, Usayd Koshul, Nick Whalen. You can check us out on Twitter at Usayd Koshul, @ Nick Whalen, and at Halas Beat. Dude, you and I have kind of been following this thing religiously, right? There's so much going on. I think the Bears have made a lot of, I don't want to say surprising picks with the first 4, but a lot of, for sure, high upside picks. I mean, how you doing today? How you feeling? I know you took the day off from work today. I did not. So Let's just dive right into it.
Yeah. I got more energy than you do, for sure. And yeah, that's exactly how I would define this class. It's like a lot of high upside besides Ozzie, which we'll get into. But I think we have to start off with yesterday because we did, record and have a whole episode on Colston Loveland. But if you want to talk about upside, you have a guy who just turned 21 years old, almost 6'6", very fluid mover for a tight end. I mean, really, really good mover, can block, can win above the rim, helps in the red zone. I was like, man, that guy is going to help out the offense. As we talked about, 12 personnel and Caleb Williams, I think, take it to the next level.
Yeah, and you talk about a player too, and I apologize if there's some background noise. There's a couple fridges and stuff that they got here with Dr. Peppers and all that, plus people moving out. I mean, it's a big organization. All right, what do you guys expect? But you talk about a player I think that was on my board certainly, just in terms of what we saw him doing. And I kind of said this. I said if the Bears are going to take another step forward on offense, Colston Loveland has to be the guy with the 10th overall pick. Now, to be clear, right, everything that we heard from Ryan Poles plus Jeff King really gets me thinking that this is a team where, they had Warren plus Loveland basically ranked as 1A, 1B. And as you mentioned on the live stream last night, it kind of came down to just what the Bears felt like was the better fit. Mm-hmm. And this is clearly the Ben Johnson factor. Ben Johnson's looking at this thing. Ben Johnson is saying, honestly, the reality of it is Warren's good, but a guy like Loveland can take your offense from here to here all of a sudden. So that's why I think this pick was ultimately made.
Yeah, and the other part, after someone gets picked, you dive more into it and stuff. His background, I think, is super fascinating. I mean, first of all, let's just think about this. He's very young. He's 2 years younger than Tyler Warren. And, and I made this comparison, a tweet today, because everyone's like, well, look at Tyler Warren's stats this last year. Well, the stats that Colston Loveland gets his second year in the NFL will be the same age as what Tyler Warren did this last year at Penn State. But you go back even further, he grew up in Idaho. He ranching type stuff. He did some rodeo type things when he was in middle school to, working, basically branding calves, all of the things you do on a farm, a cattle farm. He did all that stuff. And Ben Johnson calls him Idaho tough. And you saw that. I mean, he battled this shoulder injury, Usayd, from week 3 through the whole season. And he even talked about it in the presser of it hurt when it blocks. It hurts when he falls on it. Hurts when he tries to catch a pass. But he only missed a couple of games and he toughed it out on a bad Michigan team. And to me, that gritty type player is exactly what Chicago needs.
And it sounds like he's a coach's dream, too, for any coach at any level, because you just get the vibe that he's a player that comes in, works really freaking hard, works his butt off, and is kind of just yeah, you know what, I don't care what they say about me. I'm focused on really winning and just continuing to get better every single day. I mean, like I said, I love the Loveland pick. No pun intended there. I think it's the type of pick to where this is one of those where he's going to make the entire offense better. There's a lot of noise here. I got to get your opinion on this because you and I, we've been texting back and forth, but we barely had a virtual conversation like this. I mean, were you surprised when the Bears decided to stay at 10, not trade up, and then pick Colston Loveland and basically forego taking a running back?
I mean, after the trade with the Jacksonville had, I thought moving up was actually going to be kind of out. I was hoping they were going to be able to move back, but based on all of the lack of activity yesterday, especially before pick 25, after that, some picks happened, but I think that there weren't going to be any suitors. And so then you take the best available guy. And to me, that's tight end, Michael Williams, and maybe a D tackle. But those D tackles went about 15 to 22 or so. So, to me, I think it makes sense. And I see this as a high upside play, but also a high floor play. I mean, I can't tell you how many things that I saw of guys I trusted before the draft and after. They had Loveland above Warren. They had Loveland as a top 15 player. And that's even despite the injury, which is, obviously a question mark. But today it sounded like, if he's branding calves just a couple of days ago, I think his shoulder's doing okay. And he said basically he just can't lift heavy weights.
Yeah, and that is what he said. And someone I know asked him about the Jordan versus LeBron debate when we were at the presser in the afternoon. And so he's just like, yeah, whatever, I'll let you guys kind of figure that one out for yourselves. But, moving away from the Loveland pick here, because again, we'll talk more about all these guys in depth. And this is going to be a 20 to 25 minute episode just because I got to get back upstairs. But the other, I think, perhaps one of the more surprising selections to me that's making Bears Twitter go like, wait, what? And there's a ton of overreactions here was Luther Burden III. You're getting a guy that's 6'0". He's about 208, 210 pounds, I believe. A player who was really electric at Missouri, could play all three positions. I kind of see him as, being a really good slot receiver, but he could line up on the numbers. He could play the X, the F, the Z. I think he's a fluid mover, really tough, instinctive, athletic player that is also able to be a electric yards after the catch machine. I'm not at all surprised that Ben Johnson was lobbying for Luther Burden here.
No, I just didn't expect receiver at all. But when they made the pick, I was like, well, that's a really good value because I thought he was going to get picked yesterday. Luther Burden is basically, think of DJ Moore, y'all. That's who Luther Burden is. He's thick, so he breaks tackles, but he's really athletic too. And he can play in the slot. He can play on the outside. He played a lot more slot at Missouri. He was a second-team All-American as a sophomore. This last year wasn't as good, but also their quarterback play wasn't very good this last year. And if you're wondering, what's his pedigree like? First of all, a fun fact, he has 9 sisters, 8 are older, 1 is younger, so he's the only boy out of 10 kids. But he was a 5-star recruit out of high school. And the 2 guys that were above him, that were also 5 stars, Travis Hunter, you probably heard of that guy, and Walter Nolan, 15th overall pick. So he's in good company in terms of, okay, that's the type of potential. And those 2 guys too, you think that those 2 guys have more potential to get better. Same thing with Luther Burden. And the best thing I think about him, Usayd, didn't get picked yesterday. Where was he at last night? Or should I say early this morning, 12:32 this morning, he was on the field working out because he was mad. And you have more insight into this, but he sounds like a really motivated kid.
Yeah, we just got off the Zoom with him and it kind of ended with this hey, I'm pissed off type mentality, right? Where he was just so short, sweet, to the point. He was like, yeah, I'm just ready to be here. I'm ready to work. And I think it was one of those where in the heat of the moment, for a guy like Luther Burden, you're coming from, no disrespect to Mizzou, but you're coming from one of the underrated lower end SEC programs. So you are basically going ahead and you are flying under the radar all year. You're not getting the attention that, a receiver from Bama or Florida or Georgia would be getting, so you're kind of under the radar. So then when you do get a chance to make a name for yourself, you want to make sure everyone freaking knows. And that's why I think he's so incredibly motivated to sort of come here and then end up in a situation to where he can go ahead and he can basically prove people hey, I'm ready to be wide receiver 3. I think in the long-term scheme of things, DJ Moore under contract till 2029, right? Rome Odunze through 2027, pending the 5th-year option. Now you've got Luther Burden under contract through 2028. So their receiving options are lined up for the next couple of years. I also believe that this kind of puts guys that have spent the last few years on the roster, like a Tyler Scott. I don't think Tyler should be on the roster bubble. I do see Zacchaeus as wide receiver 4 here, but I also think that Tyler Scott's going to provide some really good special teams value, just thinking in the grand scheme of things. Because ultimately, this is one of those things where, they do have 5 solid wide receivers now, which I don't remember the last time I could say, yeah, they've got 5 really good receivers.
Yeah. Well, also you have to add in Devin Duvernay too. So, Devin Duvernay, Pro Bowl kick returner, right? So you think he would have a roster spot. So I mean, do they carry 6 receivers and they have the 2 tight ends? But in the end, all I see is Ben Johnson is getting pieces to this offense that he wants, that he thinks are going to be mismatches that he's going to utilize for defenses, things he's going to scheme guys open. Think of how he used things in Detroit. He used Jameson Williams on reverses and crossers and different things, and he set people up. And I think all of this is to put pressure on defenses and to make things unpredictable. And Luther Burden being able to run the ball, reverses, shallow crosses, screens, throw deep, that's exactly what you want. You're like, okay, Luther Burden's in the slot. Luther Burden's out wide. We have no idea what he's going to do.
You know who he reminds me a little bit of? You remember some guy named Jameson Williams that unfortunately had a little bit of a, like, I guess, rocky start to his career, but then, like, figured it out, right? Like, that's who I see Luther Burden being in this offense. His skill set is going to make DJ Moore a lot more expendable. Then his skill set's also going to go. It's also going to go ahead and make Rome Odunze a lot more expendable. I think the advantage of adding a guy like that is this: just watching some Ben Johnson tape from earlier. Like, Ben Johnson loves trips to the field. He loves trips bunches, which is 3 wide receivers basically bunched up. But he's always running trips to what? The field side, okay? And we'll get into all that stuff as we get into more, post-draft film breakdowns. But now Luther Burden's going to be the guy that is able to go ahead and is able to basically, get in motion, open things up for a lot of these guys underneath. So it's a big situation to where, certainly a really solid pick. But I think, as surprising as Luther Burden was, I mean, we kind of knew that the Bears were going to be they were doing their homework on receivers, right? They brought in Isaiah Bond from Texas. They had a couple of these, late day 2, early day 3 receivers.
Kyle Williams.
Kyle Williams, at Halas Hall for these visits. But I think the most surprising guy to me was Ozzie Trapilo, because to my knowledge, I mean, nobody was talking about him on Bears Twitter. And I think part of that is because a lot of people locked on to Campbell, Membu, Banks, or Simmons. And if it wasn't one of those 4, then it needed to be someone in the second round. But then everyone in the second round was talking corner, edge rusher, safety, not necessarily, picking a offensive tackle from Boston College.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was surprised by this one because, like, if you look at a lot of big boards, I mean, Luther Burden, a lot of people had him as a first. Like, I referenced Dane Brugler a lot from The Athletic. He had Luther Burden 27, but he had Ozzie 79th as his overall player. And so I didn't expect it also because when you look at his profile, I like Charles Grant a little bit, maybe as a left, but it looks like Ozzie has some versatility, but likely a right tackle. Really tall, y'all, 6'8", strong player. You want to talk about some flexibility, maybe some concerns there in terms of bending and things like that. And, not as athletic maybe as you want all the time. So there's some things, and we'll get into more of that one, but I didn't think he was a second round guy, first of all. And second of all, I didn't think Chicago was going to go tackle based off of who was there. I thought maybe like Tate Rutledge, who went a few picks later, or some interior guy might have made some sense, but I was a little surprised there, especially with a lot of defenders. But it is telling that his first 3 picks, Ben Johnson that is, are all offensive players.
And you go back and you look at when he was in Detroit. I did some research on this earlier just to kind of look at prior drafts. And when he was in Detroit, I mean, the Lions pretty much went with Jameson Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta in technically back-to-back years. So it's one of those situations where, this team is finally buying into the entire Ben Johnson effect. Terry Kozil, the director of player personnel, is speaking right now, and I'm getting the quotes just off a couple of the guys in the media room here, and here's what Terry had to say about Ozzie Trapilo: the consistency, the dependability. We talk about smart, tough, and dependable. He embodies those 3 things. For a big man, he moves well, technically sound. So you look at his Trapilo's RAS scores, and it's like 8 point something, right? So is he pretty athletic? Yeah. But it sounds like to me the Bears were drawn to this pick because they saw a offensive lineman that I think is going to be the Dan Skipper in Chicago, the Dan Skipper of this Ben Johnson offense to Dan Skipper in Detroit, and a guy that's just able to be freaking athletic, move really well, has more of a basketball frame, but then also a guy that is able to go ahead and is able to, just be consistent, because he did have, I think, 36 or 44 starts, and he was, one of the least penalized guys, not just at Boston College, in all of college football, which, quite frankly, pretty big thing to accomplish.
Yep. And he missed only 3 games in his career at BC. So he redshirted 1 year. He played for 4 years. He only missed 3 games due to injury. So, I mean, you're looking for a consistent guy. And again, we'll get more into this, y'all, because this is only going to be a 20-minute pod of like, what does this mean for other offensive linemen, et cetera. We'll get into more of that later. But the last pick, and I was pounding the table. You said, I was like, a defense, like the whole day I was like, yeah, I mean, you joked about it, tweeting like Mike Green's out there. I'm thinking Landon Jackson, Xavier Watts. I mean, corners. There's a bunch of corners out there, and they took Shamar Turner, D tackle, Texas A&M, which has me a little surprised. But I'll get to his game real quick. So Shamar Turner, y'all, a little bit smaller, like a 290 type of D tackle, but he's gap penetrating. He is very intense, and on the good side and the bad side. So the bad side is he has 7 personal fouls over the last 2 years. He got ejected from a game, I think, for some punches. He can jump off sides. He just really has that intensity. But as one scout had said, you want that intensity to be on your team because I think it jacks other people up and it really can intimidate the other team. But he's not going to be your 2-gap guy. He's going to be a gap penetrator. So if you look at the defense, man, they've got a lot of these Grady Jarrett, Dexter, him. You got a lot of guys. I think that we're not going to be waiting at the line of scrimmage. We're going to be in the backfield making plays with this defense.
And you talk about a guy who, isn't necessarily the most insanely athletic player in this draft class. Like, I forgot Omar Norman Lott was just about as athletic in terms of the RAS scores that Shamar Turner was, but I ultimately also kind of look at this entire situation. And again, if you hear the background noise, I apologize. There's people walking upstairs, but I think the big thing here is to understand is this too, right? Is with Turner, you are getting that guy that's going to be that massive rotational 3 tech, right? You're getting a guy that can basically be 6'3", 290. Now, when the Bears run this, again, let's put our coaching hat on here. So when the Bears are running this 4-man front with Dennis Allen, I mean, every player is basically a 1-gap player. So what does a 1-gap player mean? It means that, each defensive lineman is responsible for 1 gap. There's no 0 tech in this defense. So you don't have, anyone lining up head up on the center that's all of a sudden responsible for both the A gaps, right? That was the Vic Fangio defense, right? The last couple of years, the Bears haven't necessarily had that. And so now what you end up, I think, seeing is Turner's going to come in. The nice part about him is he can play your 1 tech, he can play your 3 tech, he can play 1I, he can even play 2I if you really need him to. But they've finally gotten around to creating a pretty deep rotation of defensive tackles here.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's something that you needed to, considering the age of Grady Jarrett at 32, considering Andrew Billings is a free agent after the year. But just a couple of quick facts I think that are interesting about Shamar Turner. He added 30 pounds before the 2024 season, and he kept his explosiveness. So, I mean, I think that's super impressive, one, to add good weight and to still have your athleticism. He had a stress fracture that he played through this last season. So you want to talk about a guy that wants to play, and that was the same thing with Colston Loveland, like played through being injured because playing football matters to them, despite both of their teams weren't very good this last year. And the person he idolized, which if you want to think of like the intensity that he brings to the field, he idolized Ray Lewis. So if you think of a guy with that much kind of intensity on the field, but NFL scouts describe him as a foxhole type and an outstanding teammate. So to me, it's one of those guys that you want on your side of the ball that's really intense, and he's going to get after either the ball carrier or the quarterback.
Yeah, and as we start to wrap this up here, which again, we'll have a ton more. I mean, I gotta ask you this. We totally skipped over this, but how about moving from 41 down to 56, 15 spots, and then going ahead and moving up the 10 spots like that right there? So just doing the basic math here, right? So 41 to 72 is 31 slots. That's a difference of 31 slots. 41 to 56 is 15 slots down, okay? Then 62 to 72 is 10 slots down. So the Bears actually got better value moving out of the third round completely by about, I want to say, 5 to 6 slots if the math is correct.
Yeah, well, I mean, my favorite is getting 109. They added that fourth round pick, and the funny part you say it is that's the pick that they gave up for Keenan Allen. Like it shifted from Bears to someone and then back to the Bears. So they got a fourth round pick, and as you said, I think they moved into an area that they liked. Not 72 back up to 62. That's an area that they liked. And as we sat there at 41, the guys that I was saying, Xavier Watts, Landon Jackson, Mike Greenix, like the type of players, were still there at those other spots. Now, again, they didn't take them, but I don't think that they missed out. I think that there's a large pool of players that were available. So, in the draft, trading and getting into these buckets is really important. So they got 2 guys in their bucket, which is good. It'll be interesting to see what they do on with the fourth round pick, but I think that might be the shot where they take a running back.
I do too. And, as we start to wrap up here, just looking ahead to day 3, I mean, a couple things here. So the Bears went into this thing with 7 total draft picks, right? The deal with the Bills takes 240 off the table for the Bears. So the Bears now have 109, 148, and then 233. So you still have, 3 picks on day 3, a 4th rounder, a 5th rounder, as well as a 7th rounder. Yeah, they could possibly wheel and deal in round 4 or 5 to kind of get into round 6 and join the party. Ozzy Trapillo's on Zoom right now, so he's saying, I don't really have a preference as to whether I play right or left tackle, which I think is very interesting because, for a player like him, I mean, again, the Bears do homework on all these guys. I think one of the big things with him to understand is that the Bears are going to need that flexibility moving forward, in terms of who can play left or right. I mean, do you have any thoughts on Ozzy's quote right there?
I mean, to me, if he has flexibility, I think overall drafting a tackle in round 2 or round 1, I think is pretty telling of 2 things. One, they don't believe in Karan Amagaji, or they're probably not going to re-sign Braxton Jones. I think it's one of the 2. So either he's going to be your swing tackle and they don't believe in Karan Amagaji, or Karan and Ozzy are going to battle it out for left tackle next year, and the other one's going to be a swing tackle for the next couple of years, and Braxton Jones is gone.
And that is going to be all part of the player personnel evaluation. I mean, as we sort of start looking ahead to day 3 here, are there, let's take 2 to 3 minutes, any players that you specifically are like, now that you're at 109, the Bears need to go ahead and grab this guy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, to me, there's a lot of running backs that I like. I can name a few quickly. I think Devin Neal could be there. Caleb Johnson's still on the board. I don't know. I don't think he's going to last all the way to the 4th. I like Damian Martinez. I like Jordan James. So those are 3 running backs. I think that could be in that 4th, 5th, whatever round range. Safety, again, is something that they still need. There's some great safeties that are still out there. I cannot see them falling to round 4, but Xavier Watts, Kevin Winston, there's I'm trying to think, is it Billy Bowman Jr.? Is that right? Is that the safety I'm thinking of? Billy Bowman Jr. from Oklahoma. He's got short arms, but he's actually pretty athletic and he can cover, at least in some range. Those would be the 2 spots that I really think you need somebody in terms of a running back and a safety. You could go edge as well, but I think that's getting pretty watered down. I don't know that you have a playmaker there that I'd like to add. So
anyways, to me, the one edge rusher that I really like is Jordan Birch out of Oregon. I think that, with the 4th round pick that they have on some of these running backs, Dylan Sampson's a guy that isn't necessarily, I think, last until the 4th round, but if he does, he's a name that I would really like. I also think that Wyatt Millen, the guard from West Virginia, would be a really solid player as well in the 4th round. That's if, the Bears decide, like, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to address offensive line in the 4th round. But I think, the one guy that has constantly been on my radar, and again, it's tough to say whether or not he is actually going to go ahead and be there, is going to be Savion Jones, edge rusher from LSU, right? So you're getting a guy that is, I think, 6'5", 6'6", 280 pounds, a player that has been pretty productive for the most part, that if you're just looking to take a step forward in terms of adding some more, then to the pass rusher group and a high upside guy. Savion Jones is your guy.
Yeah, so I think the beauty of trading down, right, is that you can take a shot at an edge rusher like you talked about. They got an extra guy, whether it's Turner or Ozzie, versus just having 41. So to me, I think there's a lot of players that we like that they could get, and so I'm always a fan of trading down. So I wouldn't mind if they traded down again and getting 2-3 of these types of players. So I think it's just the beauty of Ryan Poles wheeling and dealing and adding more potential personnel to this team. So yeah, I'm looking forward to 109. I think they're going to get a good player. Yeah,
it's going to be, a very early pick because it is one of the earlier picks in the 4th round, but it's going to be a very interesting pick as well. Before we get out of here, make sure you're keeping it locked into the Bear Report for all this NFL draft coverage. We'll have some stuff late night, Friday night, early into Saturday morning for you guys. Check us out on Twitter at Usayd Koshul, at _Nick Whalen, and at Halas Speed. Follow the Bear Report on Twitter as well. That's just at Bear Report. Like, subscribe, comment to the YouTube channel. It's at Shy Bear Report. Bear down, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you guys next time.